There exists a peculiar epoch in historical records, frequently referred to as the Dark Ages. This was a time when it seemed humanity was ensnared in a pervasive shadow of regression and immobility. But what if the prevailing understanding of this era is not the factual account, but rather one of the most significant concealed truths ever documented? Was the period known as the Dark Ages genuinely an era of decline, as we have been led to believe? Or was it, in essence, an elaborate ruse designed to obscure discoveries that certain parties wished humanity to remain unaware of? Prepare yourself, for the revelations in this presentation may irrevocably alter your perspective on history as you understand it today. Find a comfortable position, adjust the audio to your preference, and join Secrets of History at Night as we peel back the layers to uncover the profound secrets veiled behind history's facade. And remember to activate the subscribe function so you do not miss our upcoming enigmatic narrative. When the term Dark Ages is invoked, our minds typically conjure images of a somber period, an epoch where civilization appeared to be frozen in a state of obscurity. It is frequently characterized as an age where knowledge was lost, superstition held sway, widespread maladies afflicted populations, and relentless conflicts consumed the European continent. However, what if the entirety of what you have learned about this period is merely the consequence of a profound misinterpretation? Or, perhaps, it is the outcome of a meticulously crafted stratagem intended to manipulate our historical perception? The designation Dark Ages did not, in fact, originate during the very era it purports to describe. It was a term first conceived much later, during the 14th century, by Francesco Petrarca, more widely recognized as Petrarch, a celebrated Italian poet and scholar, often acknowledged as the progenitor of Renaissance humanism. When Petrarch initially employed this phrase, his intention was not to categorize an entire millennium as devoid of value or backward, as is commonly understood today. Instead, he was expressing a profound lament for what he perceived as a regression from the intellectual brilliance of the ancient Greek and Roman civilizations. To Petrarch and numerous learned individuals of his time, humanity's intellectual zenith had been achieved during the glorious epochs of Greece and Rome, which symbolized unparalleled advancements in reason, art, philosophy, and science. Gazing back upon the centuries that followed the dissolution of Rome, Petrarch perceived only a cultural vacuum, where the illuminating beacon of knowledge seemed to have been extinguished, yielding to an encroaching darkness. What Petrarch could not have foreseen, however, was the astonishing rapidity with which his initial sentiment would be distorted and expanded far beyond his original intent. Throughout the 17th and 18th centuries, a considerable number of Western historians, particularly those aligned with the Enlightenment movement, appropriated the term Dark Ages to serve their own ideological agendas. They required a stark contrast to accentuate what they deemed the superiority of their contemporary era, a supposed age of reason, scientific advancement, and refined civilization. Consequently, the entire span from approximately the 5th to the 15th century was increasingly depicted as a time characterized by ignorance, superstition, and a lack of merit for serious academic inquiry. The repercussions of this historically and ideologically motivated portrayal continue to reverberate to this day. The medieval period remains associated with negative perceptions, including oppressive ecclesiastical governance, pervasive ignorance, widespread superstition, and backwardness. Many educational materials and academic curricula continue to propagate these antiquated assertions, despite historical evidence that fundamentally contradicts them. This counter-narrative has been gradually coming to light over the course of recent decades. Historical facts reveal that the era often mislabeled as the Dark Ages was, in reality, anything but devoid of light. On the contrary, it was a period marked by considerable cultural diversity and remarkable progress. Numerous inventions and innovations emerged across various sectors, including agriculture, technology, architectural methodologies, and an ever-expanding network of international commerce. Another astounding revelation pertains to the indispensable role played by monasteries and churches in the preservation of ancient manuscripts and invaluable knowledge. Medieval monks, frequently overlooked and underestimated, acted as silent guardians who diligently safeguarded, transcribed, and meticulously preserved vast quantities of classical literature and scientific erudition, thereby ensuring its transmission to subsequent generations. Given such unequivocal evidence, one must question why history has perpetuated these misconceptions for centuries. It is plausible that this skewed perspective of the Middle Ages serves a particular historical agenda, specifically one that elevates subsequent periods such as the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. By lavishing praise upon these later eras, we have inadvertently and unfairly diminished the substantial accomplishments of a millennium that has been largely misunderstood and undervalued. As these obscured truths gradually surface, we are compelled to confront a significant inquiry. Was this historical misunderstanding genuinely accidental? Or was it a deliberate construct designed to conceal even more profound secrets? To address this challenging question, we must embark on a journey back to the pivotal event at the core of this enduring misrepresentation: the collapse of the Roman Empire, the very moment when history began to be molded into a narrative that we are still endeavoring to fully comprehend. As we have observed, the concept of the Dark Ages originated from a nostalgic sorrow for the demise of the magnificent Roman civilization. However, did the disintegration of this vast empire truly cast the world into a millennium of darkness, as we are so often informed? Or is this merely a simplified viewpoint fabricated to obscure far more intricate realities? In the year 476 A.D., Romulus Augustulus, the final emperor of the Western Roman Empire, was deposed by a Germanic chieftain named Odoacer, thereby officially signifying the conclusion of an empire that had exerted dominion over a substantial portion of Europe and the Mediterranean region for more than 5 centuries. Conventional historical accounts portray this event as a critical juncture, the cessation of civilization, and the commencement of widespread cultural and intellectual disarray across Europe. Nevertheless, recent extensive research indicates that historical events are rarely so straightforward. In actuality, the event of 476 AD was considerably more symbolic than a definitive marker of civilization's downfall. The Roman Empire had been in a state of decline for a considerable period prior to this date. Commencing in the 3rd century, Rome grappled with deeply ingrained issues, including pervasive corruption, internal power struggles and civil conflicts, pressure from migrating Germanic tribes, and protracted economic and social crises that persisted for centuries. These underlying factors, rather than any singular occurrence, were the genuine catalysts behind the gradual weakening of the once formidable empire, ultimately leading to its division into eastern and western halves in the late 4th century. Furthermore, following the year 476 AD, the territories that had formerly constituted the Western Roman Empire did not immediately descend into the chaos that we commonly envision. Instead, this era ushered in a period of significant transformations and the emergence of new kingdoms. Germanic tribes such as the Visigoths, Ostrogoths, and Franks, frequently labeled as barbarians, actually played a crucial role in preserving and adapting numerous vital elements of Roman civilization. Far from eradicating all things Roman, they actively adopted, repurposed, and improved upon Rome's legal frameworks, cultural traditions, and societal structures. A compelling illustration of this is the Ostrogothic kingdom in Italy under the reign of King Theodoric, who governed from 493 to 526 AD. Despite being a Germanic ruler, Theodoric held immense respect for Roman culture, preserving its laws, customs, and even its ancient architectural heritage. Historical evidence attests that his rule was a period of remarkable stability and cultural coexistence, wherein the amalgamation of Roman and Germanic cultures fostered a society that was considerably more diverse, sophisticated, and resilient than is commonly portrayed. Concurrently, the Eastern Roman Empire, also recognized as the Byzantine Empire, not only endured but prospered. Its capital, Constantinople, evolved into the world's preeminent hub for commerce, scientific advancement, artistic expression, and cultural development. This empire played an instrumental role in preserving, evolving, and subsequently reintroducing ancient knowledge to Europe, thereby laying the groundwork for the Renaissance centuries later. So, why has history stubbornly maintained its portrayal of Rome's fall as a catastrophic civilizational event? This stems primarily from the biased perspectives of scholars during the Renaissance and Enlightenment periods. In their endeavor to legitimize their own era of reason and scientific discovery, they deliberately established a stark contrast by diminishing or deliberately ignoring the significant achievements of the kingdoms that succeeded Rome. However, recent archaeological discoveries and historical analyses are now fundamentally challenging this distorted viewpoint. Findings unearthed across Europe pertaining to architecture, agricultural technologies, intercontinental trade, and meticulously preserved manuscripts found in monasteries collectively paint an entirely different picture. It is abundantly clear that this was not an era characterized by the destruction of knowledge. Rather, it was a period of preservation, innovation, adaptation, and creative development in its own distinctive manner. Monasteries and churches, often perceived solely as religious sanctuaries, emerged as genuine centers of learning. Monks diligently preserved, translated, and even generated new insights derived from ancient sources. These religious communities served as vital conduits, ensuring the continuity, resurgence, and dissemination of classical culture and scientific knowledge throughout the European continent. When we consider this compelling body of evidence, a more profound question arises. Why has history persisted in concealing and overlooking these crucial truths for centuries? Could it be that beyond the familiar narrative of light versus darkness, even deeper secrets lie hidden? Secrets that certain entities have meticulously kept concealed from us all along. If conventional historical accounts insist that the collapse of the Roman Empire plunged Europe into a 1,000-year period of darkness, the reality is considerably more complex. In truth, even during the era purportedly mired in chaos, another significant power quietly rose to prominence, filling the void left by Rome's disintegration. That power was none other than the Catholic Church, an organization of profound influence and enigmatic nature that decisively shaped medieval society. In the centuries following Rome's downfall, the Catholic Church rapidly ascended to a position of prominence, becoming not merely a spiritual authority, but also a formidable political and social entity. However, its true strength extended beyond spiritual or political influence. It was primarily rooted in the Church's unparalleled command over the vast repository of ancient knowledge inherited from the fallen empire. As Rome's power waned, its great cities, libraries, and academic institutions gradually succumbed to ruin due to warfare and societal upheaval. An unprecedented cultural and intellectual crisis unfolded. Thousands of ancient texts, philosophical dissertations, scientific manuscripts, and works on mathematics and astronomy faced the threat of extinction. Amidst this widespread turmoil, the Catholic Church assumed a surprising yet crucial role, emerging as the ultimate custodian of ancient wisdom. Within the protected confines of numerous monasteries situated across Europe, from Monte Cassino in Italy and St. Gallen in Switzerland to the legendary Vatican archives in Rome, monks quietly undertook a monumental and clandestine mission: the meticulous copying, preservation, and safeguarding of countless precious ancient manuscripts. These devoted individuals dedicated their lives to the painstaking reproduction of every word penned by esteemed classical thinkers such as Plato, Aristotle, Euclid, and Cicero, thereby ensuring that the illumination of knowledge would never be entirely extinguished. However, the Church's protection of knowledge was not solely motivated by altruistic intentions. Alongside preservation, the Church employed a highly strategic and enigmatic approach, systematically controlling access to this veritable treasure trove of information. Not every individual was granted permission to peruse these invaluable texts, nor was every book permitted to be shared openly. By selectively disseminating certain knowledge and deliberately withholding other portions, the Church established itself as the ultimate arbiter of medieval intellectual authority. For centuries, the libraries housed within monasteries remained strictly guarded sanctuaries, inaccessible to outsiders. The contents of these locked repositories were largely unknown, fostering endless speculation, mystery, and even suspicion regarding the Church's true objectives. Yet, when certain clandestine manuscripts recently surfaced and became publicly known, the astonishment of the populace was palpable. These newly discovered texts, originating from the Church's most secluded archives, unveiled a shocking reality. Many scientific concepts celebrated as groundbreaking advancements during the Renaissance or Enlightenment had, in fact, been studied by monks long before. Precise astronomical observations, sophisticated mathematical formulas, and even advanced medical theories previously deemed heretical had quietly existed within monastery libraries for centuries before their eventual introduction to the broader world. This discovery prompts a critical question. Why did the Church maintain possession of this vital knowledge in secrecy for such an extended period? The most evident reason, above all else, was the pursuit of power. The Church fully comprehended that knowledge equates to power, and by holding exclusive dominion over it, the Church could solidify and augment its absolute authority within society. Furthermore, there was a genuine apprehension regarding social stability. Ideas deemed excessively radical, or those that directly conflicted with established religious doctrines, if widely disseminated, could precipitate societal unrest, thereby posing a direct threat to the Church's position. The profound irony lies in the fact that the Church's secretive methodology for safeguarding knowledge contributed to its subsequent reputation as an oppressive, rigid, and anachronistic institution. Nevertheless, recent scholarly endeavors compel us to acknowledge an alternative truth. Without that discreet protection, numerous ancient intellectual traditions might have been irretrievably lost. The ultimate reality resides somewhere between these opposing viewpoints. Throughout the period commonly referred to as the Dark Ages, the Catholic Church served as both the most dedicated preserver and the most enigmatic controller of the immense intellectual heritage that humanity inherited from antiquity. If the concealed libraries within medieval monasteries across Europe provoke questions about who governs knowledge and the reasons for its potential suppression, then the narrative of the Library of Alexandria, the paramount repository of ancient wisdom, reveals an even more profound and unsettling dimension: the immense tragedy of lost knowledge, a loss from which humanity has yet to fully recover. Established circa 285 BCE in the Egyptian city of Alexandria, this library was far more than a mere collection of written materials. It represented the very nucleus of ancient civilization. At its zenith, it housed hundreds of thousands of scrolls, encompassing every conceivable field of study, including philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, geography, medicine, and even esoteric knowledge that was unparalleled anywhere else in the ancient world. Alexandria transformed into a nexus for scholars, philosophers, and scientists who converge there to exchange ideas, engage in intellectual discourse, and conduct pioneering research. However, the most profound enigma surrounding the library pertains to the precise manner of its abrupt and contentious disappearance over 2,000 years ago. According to the most commonly disseminated account, the Library of Alexandria was completely obliterated during a calamitous fire in 48 BCE, amidst the conflict involving Julius Caesar's legions in Alexandria. Nevertheless, many contemporary scholars contend that this fire may have been far less destructive, suggesting instead that the library suffered a gradual decline over several centuries. Another prominent theory points to the 4th century AD, when Christian Roman emperors mandated the closure and destruction of knowledge centers that they deemed to be pagan. Still, others attribute its demise to the Muslim conquest of Alexandria in the 7th century. This ambiguity and discrepancy have transformed the Library of Alexandria into a focal point for intriguing theories and even elaborate conspiracies involving the control and manipulation of knowledge. A crucial question currently being debated by modern scholars is this: was the library truly annihilated in its entirety, or were many of its most valuable manuscripts secretly transported to safer, concealed locations long before its eventual complete destruction? Recent studies propose that the library may never have been entirely lost. It is conceivable that some of its most prized manuscripts were discreetly relocated to more secure sites throughout the Mediterranean region, potentially even reaching medieval European monasteries. The discovery of ancient manuscripts within monasteries has fueled speculation regarding covert connections between the Library of Alexandria and clandestine European archives. This is where conspiracy theories begin to take root. Some theorize that the Catholic Church or secretive fraternities of the Middle Ages deliberately collected, controlled, and secreted away ancient Alexandrian knowledge, striving to monopolize information for ultimate power. Even more audacious theories suggest that certain highly valuable texts, encompassing advanced mathematical principles, intricate maps far exceeding contemporary understanding, and cosmic secrets concerning the fundamental nature of the universe, were selectively protected and disseminated by secretive elite groups who meticulously maintained their influence by exercising stringent control over this invaluable knowledge. Intriguingly, recent archaeological discoveries lend partial credence to these hypotheses. Newly unearthed ancient texts indicate that profound insights into astronomy, mathematics, physics, and even technology, believed to have first emerged during the Renaissance or the modern era, were actually documented with exceptional detail in Alexandria over 2 millennia ago. If these documents indeed existed, then the loss of the Library of Alexandria was not merely a cultural tragedy. It represented a devastating turning point in human knowledge, effectively retarding the progress of civilization for centuries. The most daring researchers even propose that the Library of Alexandria never truly vanished. Instead, they posit that it was deliberately dispersed and concealed by secret societies such as the Hermetic Order, the Knights Templar, or the Illuminati. These groups may have safeguarded knowledge from ecclesiastical censorship or political persecution, while simultaneously leveraging this knowledge to subtly influence and manipulate historical events. While such theories remain a subject of considerable debate, one undeniable truth is the profound and lasting impact engendered by the library's disappearance. The loss of Alexandria created an immense chasm in human history, compelling us to dedicate centuries to rediscovering that which our predecessors had clearly comprehended. And one haunting question continues to persist. Just how much invaluable knowledge from Alexandria still remains hidden, quietly awaiting rediscovery? If the enigmatic disappearance of Alexandria's library created a vast void in human understanding, leaving us with deep and lingering regret, then in another part of the ancient world, a remarkable civilization stood, diligently preserving and transmitting that precious flame of wisdom. This civilization was Byzantium, a beacon of culture and learning deliberately obscured by Western historians for centuries. The Byzantine Empire, also known as the Eastern Roman Empire, officially commenced in 330 AD, when Emperor Constantine relocated the Roman capital from Rome to Constantinople, which is modern-day Istanbul, Turkey. This empire was not only exceptionally enduring, lasting for over a millennium until its eventual subjugation by Ottoman forces in 1453 AD, but it also represented one of the medieval world's most significant centers of culture, commerce, and intellectual accomplishment. Yet, for reasons that remain somewhat unclear, Byzantium has been repeatedly overlooked or even deliberately downplayed in the official historical accounts compiled by the West. While Western Europe is often depicted as having descended into an era of chaos and superstition, the so-called Dark Ages, the Byzantine Empire was, in reality, a brilliant bastion of civilization. At its zenith, Constantinople functioned as a thriving international metropolis, serving as a vital bridge connecting Eastern and Western cultures. Byzantium fully inherited the intellectual legacy of ancient Greece and Rome, while simultaneously embracing and enriching itself with cultural and scientific influences from Persia, Egypt, Arabia, and even distant civilizations from the Far East. This extraordinary synthesis gave rise to a dazzling and sophisticated civilization unlike any other of its time. Perhaps the most significant testament to Byzantium's remarkable technological and intellectual prowess was the Hagia Sophia. Constructed in the 6th century, the Hagia Sophia was not merely an architectural masterpiece. It was a marvel that showcased the Byzantine Empire's sophisticated knowledge of mathematics, engineering, architecture, and physics, far surpassing contemporary Western Europe's capabilities. Byzantium was also instrumental in preserving and advancing knowledge through its libraries, notably the Imperial Library in Constantinople. Scholars carefully stored, studied, annotated, and translated ancient texts of philosophy, science, astronomy, and medicine, works that might otherwise have been permanently lost. These precious manuscripts later found their way back to Europe during the Renaissance, significantly fueling the revival of science, philosophy, and culture throughout Western Europe. Yet, this raises a troubling question. Why was such a brilliant and influential civilization so persistently overlooked or deliberately downplayed by Western historians? A primary reason lies in the biased and Eurocentric perspective adopted by scholars, particularly during the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. To them, history revolved around Western Europe as the center of civilization, while Byzantium, seen as inherently Eastern, was portrayed as strange, foreign, conservative, or even backward. This ideological divide created a psychological barrier, causing Western historians to dismiss or deny Byzantium's profound contributions to their own cultural development. Adding further to this distancing was the deep religious split between the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. In 1054, the Great Schism officially divided Christianity into two opposing factions: Roman Catholicism in the West and Eastern Orthodoxy in Byzantium. Acknowledging the substantial achievements of Byzantium, which had become Rome's spiritual rival, thus became politically and religiously uncomfortable for the West. This situation became even worse in 1204 when the Fourth Crusade, originally intended to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim forces, shockingly diverted to sack and plunder Constantinople instead. This tragic event not only left a deep wound, but also significantly widened the gap between East and West. Since then, Western Europe has largely chosen to erase Byzantium from mainstream history, hiding an embarrassing and contradictory chapter of its past. Yet, no matter how persistently the West has ignored it, historical truth remains undeniable. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 ironically triggered a large-scale migration of Byzantine scholars to the West, carrying invaluable knowledge preserved through centuries. This intellectual influx was crucial in laying the foundations for Europe's cultural, scientific, and philosophical renaissance. When we objectively revisit the full historical picture, it becomes clearer than ever that without Byzantium's silent yet steadfast protection of ancient wisdom, Western civilization's path of progress could have been dramatically slowed. The great paradox remains. This vibrant civilization, despite quietly sustaining the light of knowledge through a turbulent millennium, has been consistently and deliberately forgotten by the conventional narratives of history. If the brilliant Byzantine civilization was deliberately forgotten by Western historians, then there's another group of people who have endured even greater misunderstandings for centuries, those commonly labeled as barbarians. The familiar image we hold of these peoples, fierce Viking raiders, destructive Goths, and Germanic tribes blamed for demolishing the mighty Roman Empire, comes from deeply rooted historical stereotypes. But is this truly an accurate portrayal, or simply stories crafted by the victors to create a convenient contrast with their own culture? First of all, the term barbarian itself didn't initially carry negative connotations. Originating with the ancient Greeks, it described any people who didn't speak Greek. The unfamiliar sound of foreign languages, perceived as barbar, gave rise to the word. Initially, it wasn't a term of contempt or violence, merely a way to identify outsiders beyond Greek borders. But as the Roman Empire expanded, this neutral term gradually took on a more negative meaning. Anyone outside Rome's civilization was quickly labeled as barbaric, inferior, and uncivilized. Among those misunderstood peoples, the Germanic tribes offer a striking example. Though they've long been depicted as Rome's destroyers, they actually absorbed and learned much from Roman culture. Recent archaeological discoveries reveal the Germanic people adopted advanced agricultural techniques and constructed elaborate settlements rich in culture. Intricate metalwork, including weapons, jewelry, and household items, demonstrates they were not merely fierce warriors, but skilled artisans as well. The Goths suffered an equally unfair fate. Popular history portrays them as directly responsible for Rome's decline. Yet reality paints a vastly different picture. Far from destructive outsiders, the Goths actively sought integration with Roman culture. King Theodoric the Great stands as clear proof. During his reign in Italy from 493 to 526, he masterfully blended Roman heritage with Gothic traditions. Instead of dismantling Rome's legacy, he preserved its laws, safeguarded its architecture, and revitalized the economy, ushering in an era of stability and prosperity rarely acknowledged in conventional histories. But perhaps no group has faced more historical misrepresentation than the Vikings. These warriors from Northern Europe have been portrayed as bloodthirsty pirates who terrorized Europe for centuries. Yet, recent archaeological research shows Vikings were remarkable seafarers, skilled traders, and courageous explorers. Sites like Hedeby and Birka have uncovered evidence of extensive Viking trade networks stretching from Northern Europe to the Middle East, North Africa, and even North America. Vikings built a vibrant culture governed by clear laws, developed their own writing system, runes, crafted rich mythologies filled with imagination, and maintained a well-structured society. In fact, Many modern historians now argue that Viking raids inadvertently spurred the formation and unity of several modern European nations. So, why have these complex and diverse civilizations been branded as barbaric for centuries? The answer lies largely in biased historical narratives crafted by the victors. Roman historians and later Western chroniclers deliberately exaggerated contrasts: civilization versus barbarism, enlightenment versus superstition, advancement versus backwardness. Their goal was to emphasize the absolute superiority of their own culture. As a result, groups like the Germanic peoples, Goths, and Vikings faced centuries of unfair misconceptions. Only recently, through fair and comprehensive archaeological studies, has the truth started to emerge clearly. These so-called barbaric peoples actually built remarkably innovative societies, skillfully adapted to their environments, and made significant contributions to global civilization. As these old prejudices slowly dissolve, we begin to realize that those labeled as barbarians were not nearly as barbaric as we've long believed. In fact, the true barbarism may lie in the biases and prejudices that have concealed countless valuable achievements throughout human history. All this leaves us with a compelling question: how many more historical secrets remain hidden, intentionally buried beneath centuries of prejudice and biased perspectives, just waiting to be discovered? If we previously discovered that the peoples labeled as barbarians were actually victims of historical prejudice, it's now time to delve deeper into a setting we think we know well, yet which conceals countless hidden secrets: the ancient monasteries of medieval Europe. Were these peaceful places dedicated purely to prayer and meditation truly as innocent as history suggests? Or did they quietly hide profound secrets humanity was never meant to know? For nearly 1,000 years, European monasteries served as the last strongholds protecting ancient knowledge. As Roman cities fell into ruin, libraries shut their doors, schools closed, and widespread illiteracy engulfed society, it was the monks secluded within remote monasteries who quietly kept the flame of learning alive. They painstakingly copied manuscripts line by line, word by word, performing a crucial task: preserving cultural treasures for future generations. Yet the monk's role wasn't limited to copying text alone. A far more secretive and equally crucial responsibility lay in deciding which documents could be shared openly, and which had to remain hidden forever. From this covert mission emerged another story, deeper and more complex than previously imagined. Today, with ongoing archaeological discoveries and more comprehensive research, we're starting to realize that inside secret libraries, behind sealed rooms in monasteries like Monte Cassino, Italy, St. Gallen, Switzerland, or Cluny, France, monks once stored countless texts deemed heretical or forbidden by the Church. These weren't simply classical, philosophical, or scientific works. They sometimes contained revolutionary knowledge, discoveries, and inventions that, according to official history, would only emerge centuries later during the Renaissance or Enlightenment. One astonishing example is the discovery of ancient astronomical texts describing planetary movements around the Sun long before Copernicus proposed his heliocentric theory in the 16th century. This revelation forces historians to ask a startling question: did medieval monks secretly understand the heliocentric model yet hide this knowledge due to fear of censorship and punishment by the Church? Beyond astronomy, secret monastic documents reveal astonishing facts about medieval medicine. Monastery libraries in Germany and England, for instance, have uncovered manuscripts detailing complex surgical techniques, advanced wound treatments, and even sophisticated anesthetics, knowledge traditionally assumed to belong only to later periods. Yet these methods had quietly existed centuries before official history recognized their existence. Recently discovered manuscripts from secret Vatican archives show that medieval monks quietly studied Greek philosophical and scientific texts, as well as ideas originating from the Islamic world, ancient Egypt, and even distant Eastern civilizations. These bold ideas were labeled heretical because they directly challenged doctrines enforced by the Catholic Church. Therefore, monks had to carefully hide and protect these works, avoiding detection by religious authorities. But why couldn't monks publicly share this valuable knowledge? The answer lies in the strict control the Church maintained over knowledge during the Middle Ages. Church leaders feared that openly disseminating radical ideas could spark social unrest, directly threatening their own authority. Thus, they permitted only enough knowledge to maintain control, ensuring public obedience. Faced with these pressures, monks, despite understanding the significance of the texts they held, could only quietly preserve them, awaiting a future when such knowledge could safely emerge. Interestingly, the act of hiding these manuscripts was often not just censorship but also a clever way to protect cultural heritage. Thanks to this secret protection, countless precious texts survived harsh periods of censorship, patiently waiting to be rediscovered. Nevertheless, despite these positive intentions, the concealment inadvertently created a huge gap in human understanding, lasting hundreds of years. As a result, humanity long believed the medieval period was entirely backward and ignorant, an age of darkness devoid of true intellectual achievement. Today, as these secrets gradually come to light, we're finally beginning to see medieval monasteries not merely as quiet retreats for prayer, but as secret fortresses, guardians of humanity's most important knowledge, protecting and preserving what history had sought to erase forever. If the secrets hidden within medieval monasteries have already shown us that history isn't always as straightforward as we're taught, the story of Charlemagne, or Charles the Great, and the Carolingian Renaissance he sparked further reinforces this truth. Was this period truly just a dim interval amidst centuries of darkness? Or are there deeper secrets that history has deliberately overlooked? Charlemagne, born between 742 and 814, is famously remembered as a brave warrior, a gifted conqueror who united much of Europe and became the first emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Yet few people realize that his most significant legacy wasn't just his military triumphs, but a powerful revival of culture, education, and knowledge throughout Europe after centuries of turmoil. Contrary to the common perception of medieval Europe as an age of ignorance, the Carolingian Renaissance, which flourished under Charlemagne's reign from the late 8th to early 9th centuries, marked a critical turning point, a rekindling of the cultural flame that had seemingly vanished with the fall of Rome. In fact, this era could rightly be seen as a precursor to the more famous Renaissance of the 15th and 16th centuries in Italy, though it has rarely been given proper recognition. So, what exactly happened during Charlemagne's reign that created such an extraordinary period? Unlike many rulers of his time, Charlemagne didn't limit himself to mere conquest. He passionately believed in education and knowledge as keys to creating a stable and prosperous society. He established a vast network of schools, libraries, and monasteries across his empire, intentionally reviving the classical Greco-Roman culture that had been neglected and nearly lost. One of Charlemagne's greatest achievements was gathering and sponsoring the brightest scholars from all across Europe, bringing them together at his royal court in Aachen. Leading this intellectual revival was Alcuin, an immensely talented scholar from England who guided a sweeping cultural revolution unlike anything Europe had experienced since the fall of Rome. Under Alcuin's guidance, Aachen became Europe's foremost intellectual center, where ancient philosophical, scientific, mathematical, and literary works were revived and spread throughout the continent. Perhaps the most lasting achievement of this era was the creation of Carolingian minuscule, a clear, uniform Latin script far easier to read than the chaotic writing styles that preceded it. This innovation directly laid the foundation for the modern Latin alphabet still used today. But the Carolingian scholars didn't stop at culture and literacy. They also achieved remarkable advancements in science, especially astronomy and mathematics. Newly uncovered manuscripts indicate that Carolingian scholars had studied ancient astronomical theories extensively. Hundreds of years before, Copernicus and Galileo introduced their heliocentric model. This revelation has forced modern historians to question whether groundbreaking astronomical discoveries traditionally credited to later periods were actually quietly known much earlier. Given all these remarkable achievements, why has this period often been overlooked, or even deliberately obscured by mainstream historical narratives? One key reason lies in the biased storytelling of later Renaissance historians, aiming to emphasize the importance of their own era, the Italian Renaissance of the 15th to 16th centuries. These scholars actively promoted the idea that Europe had been plunged entirely into darkness after Rome's fall. Recognizing an earlier flourishing Carolingian Renaissance would undermine the uniqueness they wished to claim for their own period. Consequently, historians have intentionally minimized or overlooked the true significance of Charlemagne's achievements. Moreover, recent research suggests that many valuable texts from Charlemagne's era were either lost or deliberately destroyed. Newly discovered manuscripts from forgotten monastery archives reveal that Carolingian scholars had secretly pursued ideas deemed radical or heretical by the medieval church. Out of fear of religious persecution or societal upheaval, these works were hidden away, lost, or destroyed entirely, leaving future generations unaware of the true intellectual achievements of the Carolingian Renaissance. Today, as archaeological discoveries gradually reveal Charlemagne's hidden legacy, we can finally recognize his era more clearly and fairly. Charlemagne wasn't merely an ambitious conqueror. He was, in reality, one of the earliest architects of Europe's cultural and intellectual revival after centuries of chaos. Reflecting on this broader historical context, we see clearly that history is always filled with secrets and forgotten truths. Behind every story officially written, there are other realities, brilliant secrets quietly suppressed, waiting patiently to be rediscovered. If Charlemagne's Carolingian Renaissance revealed that history deliberately ignored significant cultural advances, it's time now to explore another widely misunderstood aspect: the remarkable technological innovations from an era unfairly labeled as the Dark Ages. Were these groundbreaking medieval inventions intentionally concealed from history? And if so, what was the reason behind this concealment? We've long been taught that the Middle Ages were stagnant and technologically backward, but recent archaeological discoveries have shown something astonishingly different. In reality, this period witnessed the emergence of technologies so advanced that even modern scientists today question the true capabilities of medieval engineers and inventors. One striking example is the mechanical clock. Official history places the first mechanical clocks in the 13th century. Yet, recent discoveries in ancient monasteries across Europe have uncovered intricate clock mechanisms with sophisticated gears and movements dating back as early as the 10th or 11th centuries. These complex devices have compelled researchers to wonder who truly invented these sophisticated machines, and why did such remarkable creations nearly vanish from mainstream history? Medieval architecture also holds baffling mysteries. Gothic cathedrals such as Notre Dame in Paris or Chartres aren't merely artistic masterpieces. They demonstrate astonishingly advanced mathematical and engineering knowledge. The iconic vaulted ceilings, intricate flying buttresses, and spectacular rose windows required precise calculations, and a deep understanding of physics that even today challenges modern engineering. Reconstructing these cathedrals with perfect accuracy remains incredibly difficult, despite contemporary technology. Medieval military technology further underscores this point. Complex weapons like the trebuchet, able to precisely calculate launch trajectories, or sophisticated crossbows employing intricate mechanical triggers, emerged as early as the 13th to 14th centuries. Some scholars now argue medieval military engineers possessed remarkable knowledge of physics and mechanical principles far ahead of what historical records officially acknowledge. But why did these groundbreaking medieval innovations nearly vanish from collective historical memory? One major reason lies in the intense control over knowledge by medieval power structures, especially the church and aristocracy. Allowing such revolutionary technologies to spread widely could destabilize existing social hierarchies. Medieval elites understood clearly that control over knowledge meant control over society. Concealing or restricting advanced inventions became their most effective method to maintain authority and prevent challenges to their power. Additionally, historians from the Renaissance and Enlightenment intentionally downplayed medieval technological advancements to bolster the prestige of their own eras. By crafting a narrative that painted medieval times as entirely bleak and undeveloped, they magnified their own accomplishments, presenting them as singularly groundbreaking. This led to a deliberate downplaying or even complete erasure of the remarkable achievements that transpired during the Middle Ages. Recent excavations in historically significant locations such as Aachen, Prague, and Venice, along with studies of European castles and monastic sites, have yielded compelling evidence of these advanced medieval technologies. Furthermore, certain confidential documents discovered within the Vatican archives suggest that innovations now exclusively attributed to the Renaissance or the Industrial Revolution were, in fact, known and secretly investigated by medieval scholars centuries prior. Perhaps the most contentious revelation concerns manuscripts originating from 12th century Spain and Italy, which detail the foundational principles of early steam-powered engines, predating James Watt's celebrated steam engine of the 18th century by over 500 years. The fact that these documents were intentionally suppressed or restricted meant that humanity was compelled to wait for several additional centuries to rediscover and further develop this crucial technology. The intentional concealment of technological advancements from the Middle Ages has not only warped our comprehension of historical events, but has also significantly impeded human progress. The paramount question we face today is, if even such extraordinary innovations could be hidden and forgotten for centuries, how many other vital secrets remain concealed, awaiting discovery? These secrets hold the potential to fundamentally alter our understanding of human history and societal advancement. If the deliberate suppression of medieval technological breakthroughs already sparks considerable doubt, let us now shift our focus to another event, widely regarded as the most devastating catastrophe of the medieval period, the infamous plague, chillingly known as the Black Death. Was this calamity truly merely a random act of nature? Or did it mask deeper enigmas, perhaps serving as an instrument of power whose full ramifications history has yet to fully disclose? According to conventional accounts, the Black Death swept across Europe between 1347 and 1351, claiming the lives of approximately one-third of the continent's population. Officially, it is stated that the plague originated from infected rats that arrived from Asia via established trade routes. However, recent research has begun to surface concerning questions that are deeply unsettling. Could this pandemic have been entirely accidental? Or was it intentionally manipulated, perhaps even amplified, to serve covertly held objectives? A compelling, albeit controversial theory, which cannot be entirely disregarded, posits that from the outset, The medieval ruling classes, encompassing both the church and the aristocracy, recognized the potential benefits such a disaster could confer. Instead of dedicating their efforts wholeheartedly to finding a cure or implementing containment measures, they deliberately capitalized on the public's fear surrounding the plague to consolidate their authority over society. Newly uncovered medieval documents, found concealed within the depths of monastic archives, explicitly illustrate how the Church leveraged the plague to reinforce its dominance and exert greater control. It was widely proclaimed to be divine retribution, a punishment inflicted upon humanity for its transgressions, thus positioning unwavering adherence to religious doctrines and ecclesiastical decrees as the sole path to salvation. This pervasive propaganda propelled ordinary individuals into a state of unprecedented panic and compliance, fostering a society that was more subservient and rigidly controlled than ever before. Additional findings from contemporary studies point to the plague's inconsistent propagation and impact across various geographical areas. While certain regions promptly implemented stringent quarantine protocols, sanitation measures, and isolation strategies, numerous others were inexplicably neglected, allowing outbreaks to spread unchecked. Such striking disparities suggest a more sinister possibility. Could regional authorities, or even more influential entities, have intentionally abandoned specific communities, thereby permitting the plague's unrestrained diffusion to weaken political adversaries or eliminate groups perceived as threats? An even more debated theory, yet increasingly supported by emerging evidence, alludes to the alleged poisoning of water sources during the plague's reign. Once dismissed as mere folklore and unfounded anxieties, archaeological findings and historical analyses now indicate that these occurrences might not have been entirely fabricated. Is it conceivable that deliberate actions contributed to augmenting the plague's destructive potency? The social and political repercussions of the Black Death are also frequently understated in conventional historical narratives. While most accounts acknowledge the severe depletion of the population, few delve into the profound extent to which it reshaped European society and its established power dynamics. The acute scarcity of labor presented an opportunity for the nobility and clergy to establish a new, even more rigid social hierarchy, concentrating authority within the hands of the elite. New employment regulations, oppressive fiscal policies, and stringent spiritual edicts rapidly emerged in the aftermath of the plague, explicitly designed to cement their enduring supremacy. Even more startlingly, recently revealed confidential documents from the Vatican and various medieval monasteries indicate that rudimentary medical knowledge, capable of mitigating plague transmission, was already available early in the outbreak. However, rather than disseminating these solutions broadly, those in positions of power deliberately withheld them, prolonging the public's fear and confusion. This strategy served not only to facilitate easier governance, but also to secure their absolute authority indefinitely. These controversial discoveries compel us to reevaluate the Black Death from an entirely new vantage point. Once perceived solely as a devastating celestial punishment, this catastrophe now appears considerably more intricate, an engineered instrument of control that was thoroughly exploited to manipulate the socio-political landscape of the Middle Ages. Ultimately, one lingering and profound question persists. Was the Black Death genuinely just a random natural disaster, or did human agency, particularly among those subtly orchestrating the broader historical narrative, actively instigate or intensify it, transforming a calamity into a calculated political advantage? And if such manipulation occurred, how many other historical occurrences, equally orchestrated, remain undiscovered, awaiting our uncovering of their true nature? If the Black Death demonstrated that history could be manipulated or distorted to conceal deeper truths, it is now imperative that we broaden our perspective and uncover another critical verity, one that has been deliberately obscured for centuries: the pivotal yet clandestine role played by Arabic civilization during the epoch commonly characterized as Europe's Dark Ages. While medieval Europe is frequently depicted as being shrouded in intellectual obscurity, the Islamic world was concurrently experiencing a magnificent Golden Age. Between the 8th and 13th centuries, prominent metropolises such as Baghdad, Cairo, Cordoba, and Damascus rose to prominence as the world's foremost intellectual centers. Within these flourishing hubs, Arabic scholars diligently preserved, translated, and significantly expanded upon the accumulated knowledge of ancient Greek, Roman, Persian, and Indian civilizations, elevating it to unparalleled levels. During this era, Arabic civilization exerted a profoundly influential impact, an influence consistently minimized or overlooked by Western historians. Arabic mathematicians, astronomers, physicians, chemists, and philosophers meticulously safeguarded classical texts while simultaneously pioneering theories and practical applications that were previously unknown in Europe. Consider mathematics, for instance. Islamic scholars were instrumental in developing algebra, a term directly derived from the seminal work Al-Jabr wal-Muqabala, authored by the esteemed mathematician Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi. This represented a crucial advancement, laying the groundwork for modern mathematical principles. In the realm of medicine, the Persian physician Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, authored the Canon of Medicine, which served as the definitive medical treatise in European universities for centuries. In astronomy, Arabic scholars constructed some of the earliest observatories globally, innovating precise astronomical instruments such as early telescopes and astrolabes. They not only preserved classical astronomical theories, but also considerably refined them, producing accurate calculations regarding celestial movements that subsequently informed the groundbreaking works of European scientists like Nicholas Copernicus and Galileo Galilei, facilitated by indirect translations from Arabic sources. This repository of knowledge gradually permeated into Europe through two principal conduits: Spain and Sicily, regions that had been profoundly influenced or directly governed by Arab rule for extended periods. Major libraries in Cordoba and Toledo, housing invaluable Arabic manuscripts, became vital conduits, enabling European scholars to reacquaint themselves with ancient wisdom, thereby paving the way for the Renaissance. So, what accounts for this vital contribution being so frequently overlooked or deliberately concealed within Western historical accounts? The underlying reason lies in the intense religious, political, and cultural rivalry that characterized the interactions between the Islamic and Christian worlds during the medieval period. Particularly following the Crusades, which spanned from the 11th to the 13th centuries, animosity escalated considerably. Western scholars found it challenging to accept the uncomfortable reality that Europe's own intellectual resurgence owed a significant debt to a civilization regarded as their adversary. Moreover, commencing with the Renaissance and continuing through the Enlightenment, Western historical narratives were deliberately constructed around the premise that Europeans had single-handedly revived classical knowledge without the necessity of any external intermediaries. Acknowledging the role of Arabic scholarship would have undermined this narrative of absolute European preeminence and disrupted the carefully constructed story of their cultural self-sufficiency. However, recent archaeological findings from ancient libraries across Spain, Sicily, and various European monasteries have brought to light irrefutable evidence of Europe's substantial reliance on Arabic scholarship. Medical, mathematical, and astronomical manuscripts discovered in Latin translations clearly exhibit profound Arabic influences. From Ibn Sina to al-Khwarizmi, these texts provide undeniable testament to this essential transmission of knowledge. Indeed, without the critical bridge provided by Arabic civilization, Europe would likely have remained in a state of intellectual stagnation for a considerably longer duration, and the Renaissance itself may have been significantly postponed. Today, confronted with incontrovertible evidence, historians can no longer contest that cultural, religious, and political prejudices led Western historiography to deliberately neglect or diminish the indispensable contributions of the Islamic world during Europe's so-called Dark Ages. Yet, thanks to these recent archaeological and historical revelations, the historical account is finally being revised with greater fairness, serving as a reminder that history is invariably far more intricate and multifaceted than traditional narratives suggest. If the revelation of the Arabic world's hidden role in transmitting knowledge to Europe compelled us to re-examine the construction of historical accounts, then an even more startling hypothesis now prompts us to question the very fundamental concept of time itself. This highly contentious notion is known as the phantom time hypothesis. First articulated in 1991 by the German historian Herbert Illig, the phantom time hypothesis advanced a claim that profoundly astonished the academic community. Approximately 300 years of history, so specifically from 614 AD to 911 AD, seemingly never occurred. According to this theory, we are not presently living in the 21st century, but rather are still experiencing a period akin to the 18th century. Illig initiated his research by drawing attention to peculiar lacunae and inconsistencies present within European historical documentation. One of his most compelling arguments centers on the striking paucity of archaeological findings and historical records pertaining to this extensive period spanning nearly 3 centuries. Illig contends that during these intervening centuries, Europe appears almost quiescent, exhibiting no substantial advancements in architecture, technology, or economic development. This observation raises a profoundly disquieting question. Could these centuries have been entirely fabricated, perhaps an artificially inserted phantom era deliberately introduced into our historical continuum? Another element of contentious evidence presented by Illig involves Charlemagne, a pivotal figure widely regarded as one of Europe's most significant medieval emperors. Illig argues that the extant accounts of Charlemagne are remarkably scant, ambiguous, and unconvincing. He postulates the possibility that Charlemagne might have been a fictional construct, specifically created to fill this enigmatic historical void. The most significant controversy associated with Illig's hypothesis relates to astronomical calendar adjustments. Official historical records maintain that the Julian calendar, established in 45 BC, accumulated minor discrepancies over the centuries, necessitating a reform implemented by Pope Gregory XIII in 1582. This reform involved the removal of 10 days to realign the calendar with astronomical realities. However, Illig highlights a perplexing anomaly. If 1627 years had genuinely elapsed since the Julian calendar's inception, the calendar should have deviated by 13 days, not merely 10. Illig interprets this discrepancy as definitive proof that approximately 3 centuries were artificially added to the timeline. Nevertheless, this hypothesis swiftly encountered significant opposition from mainstream historians and archaeologists. Their counterarguments assert that historical development did not occur solely within Europe. Continuous historical records and archaeological evidence, originating from civilizations such as the Byzantine Empire, the Islamic world, and particularly Tang Dynasty China during this precise epoch, provide robust evidence of historical continuity. These civilizations offer extensive documentation, chronicles, and artifacts that demonstrate no such phantom gap. Furthermore, contemporary archaeological evidence, notably radiocarbon dating, also challenges Illig's hypothesis. Recent excavations of Carolingian-era sites across Europe have reliably corroborated dates that precisely align with the conventional historical timeline. Consequently, many historians consider Illig's assertions to be scientifically untenable and incompatible with objective archaeological findings. Despite these strong refutations, the phantom time hypothesis continues to captivate many individuals drawn to historical enigmas. The enduring allure stems from persistent anomalies that Illig identified and which have not been definitively resolved. Archaeological voids in specific European regions or ambiguities surrounding historical personages like Charlemagne remain open subjects of inquiry. Some proponents even suggest that historical manipulation or revision need not necessarily be a global undertaking. They posit that this phantom time may have been confined primarily to European history, intentionally introduced by influential medieval institutions such as the Church or by powerful emperors. This could potentially explain why non-European civilizations exhibit no comparable temporal gaps. Even though mainstream archaeological and historical evidence largely debunks the hypothesis, the most significant value of Illig's phantom time hypothesis resides in its fundamental challenge. It compels us to critically scrutinize the very nature of history and time. Is the historical narrative we trust entirely accurate, or can it be readily altered by those who wield authority? Perhaps the most crucial insight provided by this theory is not necessarily its factual veracity, but rather the critical reminder it offers. History is invariably far more complex than it initially appears. It cautions us that countless secrets and hidden omissions may still lie undiscovered, urging us to remain vigilant and to perpetually question the accepted account of humanity's past. If the phantom time hypothesis prompted us to reconsider how history might be manipulated, it is now time to direct our attention to another ancient civilization, one of the most significant victims of historical neglect: the Celts and their enigmatic Druid priesthood. Did mainstream Western historical accounts deliberately obscure and distort the truth about them? And if so, what were the underlying motivations? At their zenith, the Celts held dominion over an immense geographical expanse, stretching from Ireland, Scotland, and Britain across France and Germany, and extending as far east as modern-day Eastern Europe. Between the 6th century BCE and the 1st century CE, they cultivated a sophisticated and vibrant culture marked by remarkable achievements. Yet, conventional historical narratives often depict them merely as savage warriors, characterized by intense ferocity and an obsession with terrifying sacrificial rites. However, it is plausible that the reality was far more nuanced than these traditional portrayals suggest. A primary reason for the misrepresentation of the Celts lies in the fact that the majority of historical records concerning them were authored by the Romans, the very conquerors who sought to impose their own culture upon the Celtic populations. Julius Caesar, in his celebrated writings Commentarii de Bello Gallico, Commentaries on the Gallic Wars, described the Celts as brave yet brutal combatants, particularly emphasizing their peculiar rituals, most notably the human sacrifices conducted by their Druid priests. These biased accounts engendered lasting prejudices, unjustly casting a dynamic civilization in the mold of barbarism. Archaeological discoveries, however, tell a significantly different story. Far from being merely violent tribes, the Celts possessed advanced artisanal skills and a remarkably refined culture. Excavations at sites such as Hallstatt in Austria, La Tène in Switzerland, and various locations throughout Britain and Ireland have revealed that the Celts were master metalworkers, displaying exceptional expertise in iron and bronze. The intricate jewelry, weaponry, and tools unearthed at these sites exhibit extraordinarily detailed designs, clearly demonstrating that Celtic craftsmanship rivaled, and often surpassed, that of their contemporaries. Furthermore, the Celts developed their own unique writing system known as Ogham, inscribed upon standing stones. Contrary to their historical depiction as an illiterate people, these inscriptions were not merely random markings. Rather, they encoded complex astronomical knowledge, calendars, and profound philosophical concepts. This clearly indicates a highly intellectual society possessing an organized social structure and well-defined philosophical underpinnings. Central to Celtic society were the Druids, frequently portrayed by Roman historians as mysterious and sinister sorcerers or magicians. In reality, the Druids were far more than mere religious officiants. They served as spiritual leaders, intellectuals, scientists, and astute lawmakers. Their expertise encompassed astronomy, mathematics, herbal medicine, and jurisprudence. Recent archaeological evidence even suggests that the Druids may have utilized monumental stone structures, such as Stonehenge, for the precise tracking of celestial events, thereby demonstrating an astronomical comprehension that far exceeded that of many contemporary societies. So, why did mainstream Western historical accounts deliberately omit or distort the truth concerning the Celts and their Druids? A crucial factor lies in the Celts' predominantly oral tradition. Druidic knowledge was seldom committed to writing, being transmitted instead through generations via oral means. When the Romans invaded and conquered Celtic territories, they deliberately targeted cultural and spiritual centers, specifically aiming to dismantle the Druidic order to undermine Celtic resistance and facilitate the imposition of Roman culture and authority. Consequently, invaluable Celtic narratives, philosophies, and traditions rapidly faded into obscurity. Moreover, Celtic culture placed a high value on freedom, revered the natural world, and exhibited a considerably greater degree of social equality compared to contemporary Roman or Greek societies. These ideals posed a direct threat to imperial control and stability. Portraying the Celts as primitive or barbaric thus became an effective political strategy, enabling conquerors to readily justify their domination and suppress any form of resistance. As new discoveries continued to emerge, the historical narrative is gradually becoming more equitable. A civilization rich in humanistic values, sophisticated technological prowess, and harmonious philosophical systems, long neglected and distorted, is steadily reclaiming its rightful position in the historical record. This narrative underscores that history is not solely constituted by that which is documented. At times, it encompasses that which is intentionally concealed. The Celts and their Druids stand as potent examples, illustrating that history invariably holds deeper mysteries, secrets that still await discovery and offer critical insights humanity continues to seek. If the deliberate omission of Celtic civilization and the Druids demonstrated that history is not always objectively recorded, we must now shift our focus to another aspect that is often misunderstood: education during the Middle Ages. Was Europe truly submerged in absolute illiteracy, superstition, and ignorance, as is commonly portrayed? Or does this represent a misinterpretation, or perhaps even a deliberate distortion, employed to perpetuate the entrenched notion of the so-called Dark Ages? When we consider education in the Middle Ages, a common image is of a society steeped in illiteracy, bound by rigid religious dogma and lacking in critical thought or intellectual exploration. However, recent historical and archaeological investigations are starting to paint a more intricate and varied picture than this enduring misconception suggests. To start, it is accurate that universal access to education was not as prevalent in medieval times as it is today. Yet, this does not imply that the entire populace was either unlettered or uninformed. In fact, archaeological findings from cities like Paris, Bologna, Oxford, and Cambridge demonstrate the emergence of vibrant educational centers as early as the 11th and 12th centuries. These institutions experienced rapid growth, drawing thousands of students and academics from across the European continent. Universities established during this era, such as Bologna in the year 1088, Paris in 1150, and Oxford in 1167, offered instruction not solely in religious matters but also in advanced fields like law, medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy. The libraries found in major monastic sites and universities during this period housed remarkable collections of books, which included meticulously preserved and carefully transcribed ancient manuscripts. This clearly points to a significant demand for knowledge and learning. Recent surveys of ancient libraries situated in France, Germany, Italy, and England reveal a compelling reality. Medieval students were not merely capable of reading. They actively engaged in profound academic discourse, thereby laying crucial groundwork for subsequent scientific investigation. Furthermore, education was not exclusively the domain of the nobility or religious clergy, as traditional historical accounts frequently assert. New evidence unearthed from dynamic commercial centers such as Venice, Florence, London, and Bruges indicates that merchants and skilled artisans, who were vital economic actors, also possessed the literacy skills essential for their trade, commerce, and craftsmanship. Epistles, commercial agreements, and financial ledgers discovered through archaeological efforts demonstrate that a considerable segment of the medieval population could read, write, and practically apply their acquired knowledge. So, why has mainstream historical discourse consistently underestimated the significance of medieval education? The primary explanation lies with scholars of the Renaissance and Enlightenment periods, who sought to elevate their own cultural and intellectual standing. These academics deliberately depicted preceding centuries as intellectually barren, rudimentary, and underdeveloped. This sharp contrast served to bolster their narrative, presenting the Renaissance as a brilliant, pivotal moment that liberated Europe from a state of ignorance. Unfortunately, this portrayal resulted in the genuine educational achievements of the Middle Ages being forgotten, minimized, or completely misrepresented. A dispassionate examination of contemporary evidence clearly shows that medieval Europe was not as uniformly bleak as it is often described. Instead, it was a complex and diverse epoch marked by significant intellectual progress. During this very period, Europe's modern university system began to take shape, and substantial bodies of knowledge from ancient Greece, Rome, and the Arab world were preserved, studied, and further developed. Misunderstandings regarding medieval education have not only deprived us of acknowledging crucial historical accomplishments, but have also diminished the essential role played by medieval academics, monks, and intellectuals in establishing the intellectual bedrock for future generations. Indeed, medieval scholars were instrumental in paving the way for Europe's subsequent intellectual rebirth. Without their diligent preservation and expansion of knowledge, the cultural renaissance associated with later eras would likely have been considerably delayed. Recent discoveries within the Vatican libraries, universities, and monasteries across Europe now conclusively demonstrate that medieval education was neither sparse nor deficient. On the contrary, it was rich, diverse, and substantially advanced, bestowing upon future generations a valuable legacy of knowledge. Today, as we gradually rectify these historical misinterpretations, we come to understand that medieval education represented a vital chapter in the intellectual journey of Western civilization, an important era that, having been intentionally distorted or overlooked, now rightfully merits a more equitable and balanced reappraisal. If the misrepresentation of medieval education has taught us anything, it is that history can indeed be deliberately manipulated. However, an even more sensitive and troubling issue now demands our attention: the systematic censorship, prohibition, and suppression of key ancient texts over centuries. Was mainstream history intentionally withholding these writings? And if so, what truly lay behind these enigmatic actions? During the era often referred to as the Dark Ages, the control of knowledge was not merely about education. It served as a crucial instrument for religious and political authorities to solidify their dominion. The ruling classes were acutely aware of knowledge's power to transform society. Consequently, they ensured that only concepts aligned with their doctrines and political interests were widely circulated. This stringent policy of censorship led to numerous philosophical, scientific, and progressive texts from antiquity being labeled as dangerous and swiftly removed from public view. A striking instance is the virtual disappearance of works by philosophers such as Epicurus and Democritus, as well as significant scientific treatises by ancient Greek thinkers. Epicurean philosophy, which emphasized personal contentment, intellectual freedom, and the questioning of divine authority, posed a clear threat to the Church's dominance. As a result, such works were rapidly banned, and possession or dissemination carried severe penalties. Similarly, groundbreaking scientific works, including Aristarchus's heliocentric theory and detailed astronomical observations by Hipparchus, met tragic fates. These texts directly challenged the geocentric model that underpinned the Church's spiritual authority, and were therefore not just forbidden, but systematically destroyed or secretly hidden. Had this knowledge become widely accessible, it could have profoundly shaken the foundations of clerical and political power. The recent rediscovery of certain long-lost texts underscores the gravity of this issue. A prime example is the recovery of Lucretius's ancient Roman poem, De Rerum Natura, on the nature of things, from a remote monastery in Germany in the 15th century. This text, which discussed atomic physics in depth and openly contradicted fundamental church dogmas, astonished scholars upon its rediscovery and raises a critical question. How many more significant texts remain hidden, awaiting their revelation? Another remarkable find involved the retrieval of lost mathematical writings by Archimedes from a monastery in Constantinople, present-day Istanbul. These works, originally inscribed on parchment, had been deliberately overwritten with prayers. It was only in the 20th century, through advanced imaging and X-ray technologies, that Archimedes' extraordinary mathematical insights were once again brought to light, presenting knowledge long believed to have been discovered only in modern times. So, why were these invaluable works deliberately concealed and forgotten for millennia? The answer lies in the inextricable link between knowledge and power. Progressive philosophical and scientific concepts inherently foster enlightenment, independent thought, and critical inquiry. Precisely what medieval religious and political leaders sought to suppress. They understood that the widespread dissemination of these ideas would inevitably lead to questioning and skepticism regarding their absolute authority. Therefore, they opted for the simplest and most effective strategy: destroy or conceal any texts that might inspire intellectual revolutions. The consequences of this deliberate censorship were immense. Not only was invaluable knowledge lost, but humanity's overall progress was drastically retarded. Scientific and philosophical insights that could have propelled civilization forward by centuries were forced to wait until the Renaissance, or even the Enlightenment, to be rediscovered and explored. Today, as ancient libraries within the Vatican and monasteries across Germany, France, and Italy continuously reveal long-hidden texts, humanity is finally recognizing that the knowledge possessed by our ancestors was far more advanced and sophisticated than mainstream history portrayed. Texts once thought lost forever are now gradually coming to light. demonstrating that humanity's intellectual history extended far beyond what our textbooks have traditionally conveyed. As these secrets slowly emerge, we clearly understand that history is not merely what was recorded. Sometimes, it is what was intentionally concealed. The truths contained within these censored ancient texts could very well represent some of the greatest secrets history has ever kept. Vital truths that could profoundly reshape our understanding of our past and ourselves. If the deliberate concealment of ancient European texts has prompted us to question historical accuracy, let us now broaden our perspective to another aspect intentionally overlooked and misunderstood for centuries: the very concept of the so-called Dark Ages. Was this truly a period of global stagnation, or merely a biased European narrative designed to obscure the uncomfortable truth that, during this precise time, Asia was flourishing and serving as the true epicenter of human advancement? First, we must recognize that the term Dark Ages specifically pertains to the conditions within Europe, not a universally experienced phenomenon. In reality, precisely when Europe encountered significant intellectual setbacks and turmoil, great civilizations such as China and India were experiencing cultural, scientific, and technological flourishing. During the zenith of China's Tang and Song dynasties, from the 7th to the 13th centuries, China achieved groundbreaking inventions that fundamentally altered the course of world history. This was the era of gunpowder, papermaking, printing, and the magnetic compass, innovations that would later profoundly reshape humanity. Few realize that movable type printing had already been developed in China during the Northern Song period as early as the 11th century, nearly 4 centuries before Johannes Gutenberg introduced printing in Europe. Yet this fact is frequently ignored or downplayed in Western textbooks. Beyond its scientific achievements, China also witnessed remarkable advancements in culture and social organization. The imperial examination system fostered a highly educated intellectual elite, possessing sophisticated administrative and governance skills unmatched anywhere else in the world at that time. Chinese literature and the arts flourished dramatically, exemplified by the renowned Tang poetry of Li Bai and Du Fu, leaving an influential cultural legacy across neighboring countries like Japan, Korea, and Vietnam. Nevertheless, mainstream Western history has consistently chosen silence regarding these extraordinary accomplishments. Concurrently, in India, the Gupta and Chola civilizations experienced similar leaps in science and culture. Most notably in mathematics, the revolutionary concept of zero was developed, which is now widely acknowledged as the cornerstone of modern mathematics. Indian mathematicians and astronomers, such as Aryabhata and Brahmagupta, made significant contributions, from calculating planetary cycles with remarkable accuracy to formulating early ideas resembling gravitational theory centuries before similar insights emerged in the West. So, why were these spectacular Asian accomplishments intentionally overlooked or hidden by Western historical accounts? A key reason was the rise of Eurocentrism, an ideological framework actively promoted by Renaissance and Enlightenment historians. To assert Western superiority, they deliberately minimized or entirely omitted contributions from Eastern civilizations, acknowledging the reality that while Europe was mired in stagnation, Asia was achieving unparalleled advancements would have undermined the narrative of absolute European cultural supremacy they wished to construct. Additionally, political and economic motives played crucial roles. During colonial expansion in the 18th and 19th centuries, Western powers sought justification for their conquests by portraying Asian civilizations as backward, primitive, and desperately in need of European enlightenment. Admitting that these societies had once surpassed Europe would have significantly complicated this narrative, making the suppression of this truth strategically necessary. Recently, independent historical and archaeological research has begun to illuminate these hidden realities. Ancient manuscripts, newly translated and carefully studied, have uncovered undeniable truths. The period Europeans refer to as the Dark Ages was, in fact, a time of extraordinary advancement and flourishing elsewhere, particularly in Asia. Today, the immense accomplishments of China and India during this era can no longer be ignored or dismissed. Recognizing this truth represents a significant step forward in building a more balanced and accurate understanding of world history. It dismantles misconceptions sustained over centuries, enabling humanity to better grasp a historical period that was complex yet incredibly rich in achievements. Today, as we gradually shed these old prejudices, long-hidden secrets finally emerge. We can clearly see that humanity's true history is inherently multidimensional. No civilization holds an exclusive claim to progress or sophistication. Only by abandoning the biased perspective embedded in traditional Western historical narratives can we fully uncover the greatest and most vital truths that prejudice and time have conspired to hide. If history has deliberately ignored the extraordinary achievements of Asia during Europe's Dark Ages, then within Europe itself, another mystery remains shrouded in half-truths and legends: the existence of medieval secret societies. Did these clandestine organizations truly exist, safeguarding ancient wisdom? Or are they merely products of human imagination, woven from folklore, curiosity, and intrigue? In an era when knowledge was tightly controlled by the church and the ruling elite, it is understandable that groups would secretly resist such rigid censorship. Stories about these secret societies quickly spread, cloaked in mystery and sparking centuries of speculation. Who were they? What was their true purpose? And why was their existence always enveloped in secrecy? One of the most renowned secret societies of medieval times was undoubtedly the Knights Templar. Initially formed as a modest group of warrior monks in the year 1119 to protect pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem, within just a few decades, the Templars inexplicably became one of Europe's most influential powers. They controlled a vast and complex financial network and possessed hidden knowledge that even the Church found unsettling. Recently uncovered ancient manuscripts and letters from France and Italy indicate that the Templars held not only immense wealth, but also rare and precious documents from the Islamic world, including advanced texts in mathematics, astronomy, and science previously unknown in medieval Europe. The rapid and mysterious rise of the Knights Templar unsettled rulers like King Philip IV of France. In the year 1307, he conspired with Pope Clement V to dismantle the order, accusing them of heresy. Yet, one significant question remains unanswered to this day. What happened to the secret documents and knowledge possessed by the Templars? Many scholars speculate that these valuable texts were secretly hidden or passed on to other secretive groups, becoming one of Europe's enduring mysteries. The story of the Knights Templar leads us to another legendary secret society, the Illuminati. Although officially founded in the 18th century, many researchers argue the Illuminati inherited knowledge and organizational structure from earlier medieval secret societies, particularly the Templars. Conspiracy theories and legends surrounding the Illuminati often speak of their goals to control knowledge, resist established power structures, and secretly influence major historical events. While modern historians typically deny the Illuminati's prolonged existence, the legend itself has profoundly shaped popular culture, reflecting a deep human desire to uncover hidden truths and recognize guardians of forbidden knowledge. Another, lesser-known but influential secret society of the Middle Ages was the Hermetic Brotherhood, stemming from Hermetic philosophy rooted in ancient Egyptian wisdom. Hermetic beliefs revolved around profound cosmic knowledge, supposedly reserved for a select few initiates entrusted with its preservation. Newly discovered manuscripts from hidden libraries in Italy and Germany suggest that Hermetic societies indeed operated clandestinely, protecting texts containing revolutionary knowledge about alchemy, medicine, astronomy, and advanced scientific theories that terrified church authorities. Because these ideas directly challenged mainstream doctrines, they could only survive in secrecy, passed down through tightly knit circles and esoteric rituals. But were all these stories merely legends? Recent archaeological discoveries indicate that certain medieval secret societies and the knowledge they protected were more than myth. Ancient manuscripts found in isolated monasteries clearly demonstrate that throughout the medieval period, clandestine groups risked persecution to safeguard vital knowledge against church censorship and political suppression. Texts detailing alchemical formulas, meticulous astronomical observations, and advanced medical practices hidden away in secret locations prove undeniably that there were indeed individuals prepared to risk their lives to preserve humanity's intellectual heritage. Nevertheless, legends surrounding secret societies swiftly became integral to popular culture, exaggerated and embellished through countless books, movies, and conspiracy theories, making the distinction between fact and fiction extraordinarily difficult. Yet, regardless of the truth behind each legend, the persistence of stories about medieval secret societies highlights an undeniable reality. Throughout history, there have always been individuals who recognized the profound value of knowledge and were willing to protect it at all costs against censorship and oppression. It is precisely this spirit that breathes enduring life into stories of secret societies, not simply as myth, but as powerful evidence that, no matter the circumstances, knowledge has always had its secret protectors. If medieval secret societies quietly preserved and protected ancient knowledge against suppression by the Church and Western political powers, there remains another great civilization whose pivotal role in transmitting knowledge into Europe still awaits proper recognition: the Islamic civilization. But why has a civilization of such brilliance been deliberately overlooked or even denied by Western historical narratives? Between the 7th and 13th centuries, while Europe labeled its condition the Dark Ages, Islamic nations from the Middle East to North Africa and Spain entered an unprecedented golden age. Great intellectual centers like Baghdad, Damascus, Cordoba, and Cairo not only attracted the brightest scholars but also became hubs for preserving, innovating, and disseminating cutting-edge knowledge to the entire world. One of their most prominent contributions was in mathematics. The Persian mathematician al-Khwarizmi, widely regarded as the father of algebra, authored the groundbreaking treatise Al-Kitab al-Mukhtasar fi Hisab al-Jabr wal-Muqabala, from which the term algebra originated, forming a cornerstone of Western mathematics. Additionally, the numeral 0 was broadly introduced and disseminated into Europe by Arab scholars, a revolutionary leap in the history of mathematics. The realm of celestial studies powerfully highlights the remarkable achievements of scholars within the Islamic world, such as al-Biruni and Ibn al-Haytham. They presented groundbreaking research on cosmic movements and the principles of light, far surpassing their European contemporaries. Al-Biruni precisely calculated the Earth's circumference and conducted meticulous astronomical observations. Ibn al-Haytham, recognized as the pioneer of modern optics, clearly elucidated the fundamental laws of light and refraction, insights that Europe would require centuries to independently rediscover. The Islamic civilization also left an equally significant imprint on the field of medicine, most notably through Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna. His monumental work, The Canon of Medicine, synthesized medical knowledge derived from Greek, Indian, and Persian traditions, becoming the authoritative medical text across Europe for hundreds of years. Furthermore, Islamic physicians were instrumental in developing the concept of contemporary hospitals, complete with specialized surgical suites, early forms of anesthesia, and innovative methods for controlling infections. Despite these immense contributions, historical accounts in the West frequently omit or significantly diminish the role of Islamic civilization. A primary catalyst for this omission stems from the intense cultural and religious rivalry that existed between Christian Europe and the Islamic world, a tension acutely amplified by the Crusades. Following these campaigns, European scholars deliberately propagated a portrayal of Islam as an antagonist, thereby obscuring its vital intellectual contributions. This served to uphold a narrative that positioned Europe as the sole locus of civilization and progress. Moreover, from the dawn of the Renaissance onwards, European historians constructed a simplified and appealing narrative suggesting that the wisdom of classical Greece was directly resurrected in Europe without the necessity of any intermediaries. Acknowledging the pivotal role played by Islamic civilization in preserving and transmitting ancient knowledge would have undermined their assertion of exclusive Western superiority. Recent discoveries are now beginning to fill these deliberate historical voids. Ancient repositories of knowledge located in Toledo, Spain, Cairo, Egypt, and Baghdad, Iraq, unequivocally demonstrate that Arabic translations, subsequently rendered into Latin, formed the indispensable bedrock upon which Europe rebuilt its understanding of classical Greek wisdom, thereby facilitating the Renaissance itself. Without the diligent preservation and subsequent innovation undertaken by Islamic scholars, Europe's historical trajectory and its rapid advancement in science and culture might have followed a profoundly different course. Embracing this truth is not merely an exercise in historical accuracy. It is a matter of fundamental justice and intellectual integrity in our comprehension of human civilization. The Islamic civilization represents far more than a simple overlooked chapter in history. It stands as compelling evidence that historical accounts are often riddled with biases, intentional omissions, and fabricated blind spots. Today, as these truths gradually re-emerge, our paramount responsibility is to openly and honestly address these omissions. Only by shedding long-standing prejudices can the brilliant luminescence of Islamic civilization, deliberately obscured by Western historical narratives for centuries, finally reclaim its rightful and indispensable position within the grand tapestry of human endeavor. If Western history deliberately concealed the profound contributions of Islamic civilization, we must now confront another historical event that has been distorted and mythologized for centuries: the Crusades. Beneath the pious banner of liberating the Holy Land lie deeper motivations and clandestine interests that history has seldom fully disclosed. For generations, literature and cinema have depicted crusaders as valiant figures, Christian champions engaged in a righteous mission to reclaim Jerusalem from Islamic dominion. Yet, upon closer examination, the reality proves to be considerably more intricate. The Crusades were not solely religious confrontations. They were also fueled by significant political aspirations, explicit economic interests, and carefully concealed strategic power plays. Commencing with the pronouncement by Pope Urban II in the year 1095, the First Crusade rapidly evolved into a potent instrument for the Church to consolidate and extend its influence beyond the confines of Europe. The liberation of Jerusalem transcended a sacred obligation. It served as a vehicle for the Roman Church to unify a fractured Christian world under unwavering papal authority, thereby reinforcing the Pope's absolute power. Behind the religious pronouncements lay palpable pragmatic objectives for political and spiritual dominance. However, the Church was not the sole entity to derive advantage from the Crusades. Numerous European nobles and knights perceived these expeditions as prime opportunities to amass wealth, enhance their personal standing, and expand their territorial holdings. Prosperous and strategically vital regions such as Syria, Palestine, and Egypt represented enticing objectives due to their command over crucial trade arteries connecting Europe with Asia. Crusader principalities like Antioch, Edessa, and Tripoli swiftly emerged as economic powerhouses, generating substantial profits for the European aristocracy. The pillage of Constantinople during the Fourth Crusade in the year 1204 clearly illustrates that religious ideals were not consistently paramount. The sudden act of betrayal and the ransacking of a prosperous Christian city demonstrated that Western powers were readily inclined to sacrifice even their own allies in pursuit of economic and political advantages. But does a still deeper stratum lie beneath these military endeavors? Contemporary research suggests that in addition to territorial and economic gains, another significant objective involved acquiring the rich repositories of knowledge held within the Islamic world. As the Crusaders occupied territories across the Middle East, organizations such as the Knights Templar covertly amassed vast collections of Arabic manuscripts pertaining to medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy, intellectual treasures meticulously preserved by Islamic scholars over centuries. This intellectual bounty was discreetly transported back to Europe, significantly contributing to the continent's subsequent cultural and intellectual renaissance. Nevertheless, Western historical accounts frequently downplay the devastating repercussions of these campaigns. 2 centuries of conflict resulted in the loss of hundreds of thousands of innocent lives, encompassing not only Muslims but also Jews and local Christian populations. The vibrant cultural mosaic that had flourished peacefully for centuries in the Holy Land suffered irreparable harm, leaving behind social scars that remain palpable to this day. Even within Europe, the consequences were profound. The immense expenditure associated with these military operations led to severe economic hardship and exacerbated internal strife among European nations, each vying for newly acquired territories and resources. Yet, why has Western historical tradition consistently opted to minimize or disregard these serious ramifications? One of the principal reasons lies in the fact that, over time, the Crusades came to symbolize European valor, sacrifice, and religious idealism. To acknowledge the pragmatic motivations and tragic outcomes underlying these expeditions would have profoundly shaken the carefully constructed historical image cultivated over centuries. Today, recently unearthed manuscripts from European monastic institutions, lost texts discovered within the Vatican archives, and recent archaeological findings in the Middle East are collectively revealing a radically altered truth regarding the Crusades. These wars were not merely clashes between 2 civilizations, but rather calculated outcomes driven by political stratagems, economic avarice, and power struggles, motives deliberately concealed for hundreds of years. Recognizing this reality not only facilitates a more accurate understanding of our past, but also imparts a crucial lesson regarding the inherent perils of historical accounts penned solely by the victors. Only by bravely confronting the genuine motivations behind historical events and acknowledging their devastating consequences can we forge a more honest and comprehensive historical narrative. Ultimately, this candor is indispensable for humanity's advancement and for extracting valuable lessons to shape a more promising future. As we reflect upon this extraordinary journey of uncovering obscured truths from what has long been termed the Dark Ages, one irrefutable reality becomes remarkably clear. History has consistently been authored by the victors. Consequently, our understanding of the past often reflects only a limited perspective, replete with biases, misconceptions, and deliberately suppressed facts. Throughout this exploration, we have discovered that behind familiar narratives lie startlingly different realities. We observed how the Vikings, once characterized as savage marauders, were in fact intrepid explorers, whose voyages fostered connections and enriched cultures globally. We rediscovered the extraordinary intellectual achievements of Islamic civilization, long neglected by Western discourse due to cultural and political prejudices. And we have come to appreciate that the Crusades encompassed far more than mere holy wars. Beneath the religious veneer lay intricate political machinations, economic ambitions, and a strategic pursuit of knowledge itself. All these revelations converge on an unmistakable conclusion. History is never confined solely to written records. It is replete with vast lacuna, untold stories, and intentionally distorted truths. What we comprehend represents merely a fraction of a larger, richer, and infinitely more complex tapestry. But why is it so profoundly important to grasp history accurately? Firstly, and most crucially, history shapes our perception of ourselves and the world around us. Flawed or distorted historical narratives foster dangerous prejudices, misunderstandings, and unnecessary conflicts among cultures, ethnicities, and nations. Only by fully comprehending our past in a fair and impartial manner can we truly understand our present and construct a brighter future. Secondly, the pursuit of historical truth is vital for safeguarding our intellectual freedom and creativity. When history and knowledge are manipulated by dominant power structures, society becomes susceptible to control and exploitation. It is only by courageously delving into the obscured corners of history and daring to pose challenging questions that we can ensure our intellectual autonomy and avoid repeating past errors. Yet, despite all that we have uncovered, countless mysteries still lie ahead. Ancient civilizations yet to be fully comprehended, lost technologies awaiting elucidation, hidden manuscripts resting silently in ancient libraries. All eagerly anticipate those who possess curiosity, courage, and a readiness to continue this remarkable expedition. Will we uncover even greater enigmas in the future? Could the myths we have dismissed one day prove to be true? Or could the certainties we have always held suddenly crumble into doubt? Intriguingly, the answers to these questions lie within our grasp. For you, the listener, are an integral part of this historical exploration. We shall continue to expand our minds, pose bold inquiries, and delve deeper into the mysteries of the past, for this is the sole avenue through which humanity progresses and flourishes. Now, I would be delighted to hear from you. What historical enigmas do you believe remain undiscovered? Which subjects should we investigate next on this journey? Please share your thoughts, ideas, and the historical mysteries that captivate you in the comments section below. Your perspectives will directly influence the subsequent chapters of our exploration, as history is never a closed book, but rather a narrative waiting to be continued, written collaboratively by all of us. Heat, heat, ooh.